I started this show out as kind of just a family history, so when I'm dead and gone, my kids and grandkids would know something about their grandpa. But then I evolved, and I thought it might be kind of a fun show for veterans and veterans homes, so that's what this version is. There was an episode from Everybody Loves Raymond. It was Robert's wedding, and they says, "Does anybody object?" And the mother stands up and talks for 10 minutes and then sits down. Well, they decided that needed to be edited out of his wedding, and there's some things in my story that need to be edited out of mine. I don't want to make light about veterans, your health, hospital, VA homes. It's a serious subject. My father died in a veterans home. My father-in-law died in a veterans facility. My brother died on the way to a veterans hospital. So I know it's a serious subject, but still I want to have fun with it. I had a girl from the Chicago area while visiting her grandmother in my hometown. We developed a romance, and we had a hot, steamy letter writing campaign. Now she was 38, 24, 36, and I could put in these letters that I had broken my leg in football. The bone was sticking out, but I poked it back in and put a little bit of tape on it and continued in the game. She was a drama queen, and a couple days later I would hear these phone calls all panicked. So we developed this J with a circle on it whenever I wrote a joke, so she would know. Apparently I was interested in something other than her mind. Girls' measurements may be slightly inflated for storytelling reasons. This is my first bad joke. What do you do if you have a radio face and you're producing a slideshow? Use your Army training to camouflage your face. I went to West Virginia Liars Storytelling Contest program, and it inspired me to create this VA health system half-ass unofficial manual. I was also inspired to create a lion-ass veterans organization because I found out you only needed to have in these stories from this storytelling was a nugget of truth, and I can do that. It took nearly 50 years for me to become a hero in my own mind, and I was kind of like a Forrest Gump type hero. Forrest Gump was kind of a Vietnam era fictional character, and he was shot in the butt, and President Johnson was giving him a medal, and he said, "Forrest, where were you shot?" And he pulled down his pants and showed him he was shot in the butt. I was shot in the butt twice, and no Purple Heart was earned, and I guess it was because I was shot with penicillin and tetracycline, and I think there's a few vets will know why I was shot. I'm recording this because it's the kind of thing I wished I would have had my dad talk about, because I know he was in the Army twice, and I don't know anything about it. So this is for my kids and maybe my grandkids when they're 18 or so. I was drafted in August of 1969, infantry trained at Fort Lewis, Washington, sent to Vietnam from January 1970 through March of 1971. This is my Vietnam tour, the best I can remember in 2016 after 46 years. There is a warning. This story contains cussing, booze, drugs, nudity, and sex, but not as much as actually was in Vietnam. On July 6, 1949, I kind of straddled. I could look back at the 40s and see the Depression era people, and I could look forward to see live to see the man on the moon and the digital age. Black and white TV was just coming in. My favorite shows were The Lone Ranger and Hopalong Cassidy. John Wayne always won in the war movies and in the westerns. I could go to my uncle and see subsistence farming, and I could see older people that have lived through the Depression. In David City, my poor parents had 4 boys, and we had lots of freedom all day long to invent things to get in trouble with. Alcohol was a big part of our family, and it was a big part of the culture I was raised in. We would walk for miles along the highways picking up pop bottles and then go buy candy, pop, junk food at the store till the state litter law came into effect and wrecked our business. I loved this gizmo I was driving. Once on these steps, my mother was standing. I was in the yard. I was supposed to come over and get a spanking. I wasn't going to go over there. That was crazy. My mother came off the porch running and caught me and gave me a spanking. I didn't know women could run. Another time on these steps, my neighbor Bob and I were in a big fist fight. He was about 40 pounds heavier than me. He was on top of me, just beating the crap out of me. And my dad watched it for a while, and then he stopped the fight. I was so happy that he stopped the fight and I didn't have to give up. The one good thing I did have was a very moral, loving, and hard-working mother. Throughout my whole life, whenever I've done something wrong, and I've done lots, I can think back, and she showed me by example what was right and what was wrong. On May 31st, 1952, there was a good-looking young lady born in North Bend, Nebraska. She was kind of a cowboy buckaroo, too, and I was glad, I didn't know her, but I was glad that she came along the scene about then. Mimi Eisenhower bangs were the rave, and she really looked cute with hers. My brother Woody pushed me in a wagon into the side of our neighbor's garage, and I got all scratched up. I can still remember my mom giving him heck because I'd have those scabs on my pictures. I'm not proud of the way this story begins, but this is the way it begins. I was an angry 15-year-old. I was drunk. I was urinating in a high school window. I had just kicked in. Not a good way to start. Luckily for me, sports came along. I was pretty good in some of the sports, and so that kind of changed the direction of my life. My nickname in high school was Wild Man, and I could channel that aggression I had into something productive, and I even got compliments on knocking somebody on their butt. I graduated from David City High School in 1967. I'm trying to be optimistic when I say that I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible, but I still think it's dumb. At the time, football, wrestling, beer drinking, and raising hell seemed more important than studies. I was 15 years old when I got this motorcycle so I could go work in the hayfields. Well, I ended up having lots of fun with this motorcycle. My neighbor, who had a driver's license, I'd set her on the front seat and I would drive from the back seat. It was called the Ultimate Distracted Driver. Two of my coaches in David City High School said that I was good enough to play football at a small college. Otherwise, I probably would have never even thought about going to college. I was on the track for a working man in high school. In the fall of 1967, I went to Wayne State College, and I walked on as a football player, and my major was just what my favorite teacher was. He was a shop teacher, so I was a shop teacher as my major. My experience at Wayne for a year and a half a semester, I learned that the industrial arts was not my major. I couldn't build things, and I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. But the one thing I took away from Wayne was I got an A in a history class. What the hell does this mean? I've never got an A in any class, let alone a history class. What later I was to find out, it was the start of a lifelong love of learning. And I went on and got degrees and stuff like that, but it all started with that one A in that one history class. I was so excited about that class, I couldn't believe it. Turned 18, you went on the bus to Lincoln for your draft physical, and you stayed overnight. The physical sucked, but I can remember something about a movie theater, a Muse movie theater, that was definitely not mama approved. I called this my live for today period of life. I dropped out of college, got 2 Dear Johns, and I moved to Lincoln, and I bought a GTO I couldn't afford. In the back of your mind was the draft in Vietnam. And in 1967, there was different kinds of people. Some were gung-ho, like full steel jacket kind of people. They really want to get there and kill commies. Then there were dodgers. They would do something, stay in school or something to avoid the draft. Some people would join, like the Navy, so they knew they wouldn't be in combat. I was one of those that was kind of on the fence. I'd go, but only if called. You had to kind of decide for yourself what was morally right at that time, and it wasn't one right answer. It was the right answer for you. The first step off the bus in basic training, this drill sergeant, he was screaming in my face. I had a cold, and so I had red underneath my nose. "That nose is the nastiest blankety blank piece of shit I've ever seen." And I had to just keep my heels to there, clicked, and just look straight out. This was my introduction. Welcome to the Army. I took my basic training and advanced infantry training at Fort Lewis, Washington in the fall of 1969. One of our Army marching songs is, "I don't know, but I've been told this old shit is getting old." And this is one that I cleaned up. These were some of my fellow recruits from Nebraska. If you were from Nebraska, Omar Lincoln, it didn't matter. In the Army, you were a farmer. Everybody bitched about the food, except me. I thought it was pretty good. Was my mom a bad cook? Somehow basic training and advanced infantry training turned me into 190 pounds of muscle. I was probably in the best shape of my life. I guess Army did some things okay. Towards the end of our advanced infantry training, your attitude kind of slipped. My buddy Joe and I needed 300 points on a PT test of 500, so we maxed three events, and we went and found the donut. What was the Army going to do? Draft us and send us to Vietnam? Yeah, probably about a 90% chance. We traveled once to Mount Rainier, and that was pretty cool. And then I had a friend from David City, Dave Cook, and I called and said, "I'm on the Space Needle, come and get me." So he came and got me, and I spent a couple days with him and his wife. Larry Sabata from David City was in my training with me. Larry was a crack shot. He could shoot 500-yard targets that I couldn't see. 5 of us from Nebraska made a flying trip back one time for the holidays in Larry's car. I remember something about a stop at Missoula, Montana. Yeehaw! I spent a day of my life peeling potatoes, just like in the old-time movies. Our drill sergeants were combat veteran NCOs, and one time in front of this airborne ranger company commander, they played a trick. They brought a rabbit out in front of the troops and said, "Sir, we have a treat for you." They chopped the rabbit on the head, ripped the heart out, and gave it to the company commander, and he ate it while I was still beating. Our training was done, and we were all just going to go our separate ways. We thought we'd keep track, but we never did. This sums up basic training at Fort Lewis in July of '69. Man, my feet hurt. Damn, it was hard today. What's happening tomorrow? Oh, by the way, a man walked on the moon today. 1969, the draft had run through most of the poor young single men. Most of our group had some college education. Many were older, and many were married with kids. So I felt kind of good at the stage in life I was at. On December 1st, 1969, the draft lottery came out, and I was 327. I wasn't going to get drafted, man, except for a little bit of a problem. I was already in basic training. 90% of us got our orders to go to Vietnam. The plane only stopped for an hour in Hawaii to refuel, but I'm proud to say that I got laid in Hawaii on my way to war, which happens to be the title of this program. LEID, laid, is friendship flowers in Hawaii. This is for the perverts. On the way to Vietnam, the plane broke down at the Wake Islands. We had a day of swimming on the beach in our fatigues and partying. I bought these little bottles of liquor and put them in my side pocket, which proved to be a mistake a little bit later. I I graduated with my cousin Bud, and on January 20th, 1970, I arrived in Vietnam, and he was leaving Vietnam on the same day. We could have even used the same plane. When you first got to the country, they give you an orientation meeting, and they were talking about don't bring drugs or things that would wreck Vietnam into the country. It was a frickin' joke after being there. I had 2 bottles of whiskey that I bought when the plane broke down, and they were in my pocket. They clanged together and broke, and so this whiskey was pouring down my leg into my boot just as they were telling us not to bring any booze or anything into the country. I guess sometimes being a hick farmer from Nebraska pays off. When they were assigning jobs, they said, I'm sorry, you're not going to be what you were trained to be, an infantry soldier. You're going to be a mechanic. It took me about 3 seconds to say, yes, I am a mechanic. I might not have been so happy if I had known that Tay Ninh City nickname was Rocket City on the Cambodia border. When I got to Tay Ninh, everybody was nervous. I didn't understand why. It was January of 1970. I didn't know about the Tet Offensive 2 years earlier. I should have studied current events just a little bit more. Tay Ninh was okay. It was a small little company and kind of out of the way. It took a while to get used to the things in Tay Ninh. The nightly incoming, you'd shut off the lights when you went to bed. And 2 minutes later, you'd turn them on, and there'd be rats in your room kind of close to you. So you just put on a fan and just slept and hoped that they didn't chew on you. The Vietnamese that we were around, they'd eat funny things like rice and cockroaches, and the fruit was real tiny little stuff. It was just weird, but once you got used to it, I guess it was okay. 508th at Tay Ninh was a small unit. We had, if we got our job done, we could do lots of things, like maybe a pallet of steaks would fall off, or beer, or one time a helicopter group gunship brought in a deer, and we had a barbecue. My duties ended up being a mechanic. They kind of just divided you up. I was assigned. I'm a mechanic? Well, kind of. The Army used on-the-job training, and my teacher would get underneath the vehicle and ask, which way do I turn the bolt to loosen it? He was a drugged-out short-timer from Chicago. If we kept the generators running, we were heroes. If we didn't, we were yelled at. The sergeant in this picture figured out how to put some barrels together, run a pipe through them, and burn diesel fuel, and we had hot water. 20 people in our unit, and we were the only ones of the 500 that had hot water. I love this guy. My buddy and I got this bright idea of putting together different parts of these blown up Jeeps, and pretty soon we had our own Jeeps. We were PFC and a Spec 4, and we had our own Jeeps, and there was officers that didn't have one. A tank crew gave me Monk the Monkey. He kind of broke up things that made the duty a little more fun. There was a problem, though, when people would scare it. Apparently I was zippity-doo for some reason. This was probably incoming, or it could be a crap burning detail, which wasn't the one you volunteered for, you got stuck with. You were allocated a couple cartons of cigarettes a month. You got these coupons, and I gave mine to this Mike Fretzen, the company clerk, and he turned it into a business. He would trade them for marijuana, send them back home, and make money. Nebraska tying Southern Cal in 1970 shut up this Brian from California. Nebraska went on that year to win the national championship, beating LSU. So give me something to crow about. There was never any grass on our base, always just dirt and mud. Couldn't have been Agent Orange, could have it? The Army wouldn't have done that to us, would have they? Mike Fretzen, our company clerk, took me to the Kaudai Temple. It was a strange place. These monks wore brilliant white robes in the middle of this scum hole, and you check your guns in at the gate, and you take your shoes off when you walked inside the buildings. Today, this is still a tourist attraction. They have day trips from Ho Chi Minh City to come here, which is about 30 miles away. One time, 8 of us went on a trip to Cu Chi. We went to the clubs a little too hardy, and when we got to where we were going to sleep, there was only 7 beds with mattresses. Our 8th buddy got a bed without a mattress, just a springs, and when he woke up, there were these deep ridges in his back. Years later, I found out that Cu Chi, it was the largest tunnel system. They had been working for like 80 years on these tunnels right underneath where we were sleeping. Saigon in the 1970 was a place without rules. There was people were driving everywhere, all kinds of vehicles walking, and it was a scary place to drive a truck through. You just had to put your truck into low gear, make lots of noise, and pretend like you didn't see people. Well, I wasn't blind. You had to look a little bit at people. On one of our convoys, our truck broke down, so I had to use some high-tech mechanical skills to fix it. There were 2 main groups, the juicers, which were the drinkers, or the potheads, which were the marijuana and drugs. Monk was definitely a juicer. In fact, he might even had a problem. They weren't Army approved, but we did have doors on our bedrooms when I was in Tay Ninh. It did have some benefits, I'll say that. The Vietnamese ladies would wash our clothes in kind of the old-fashioned way. Sometimes they'd beat them on rocks. They were hard-working. This gal was a bartender for us one day. She went home, and that night a rocket came in, blew her head off. It was just kind of when your time was up, but still was sad. About halfway through your tour, you got what they called R&R, rest and recreation. You could go to Hawaii or Philippines. I chose to go to Australia. And I remember how good it was just to eat an egg sandwich and drink fresh milk. And then around eyed ladies, they spoke this strange, sexy language called Australian. Hubba hubba. It's cool to go to the Bob Hope show. Although I was so far back, they were just little specks. We saw Bob Hope and Margaret and some other of the pretty big-time performers. The Bob Hope show, but it was fun just to be with a bunch of other people just having fun. Kind of made you feel like you were back home, or at least what back home was like. After about 8.5 months of being in Tay Ninh, they were scaling the war back, and they sent me to Long Binh. I call this my asleep at the wheel stage up until this point. I was in the real army now. We had to get rid of our Jeep. I could go swimming about every day. I felt kind of guilty. And I decided to extend my tour because it was a pretty safe place, and I would just soon get out of the army sooner if I could. I can remember on my 21st birthday, went to the club, listened to the bands, did some drinking, went back home, and went and got high on marijuana, which was one of the 2 times. The first time was to show my drug buddies that I wasn't a narcotic agent. So I did it, smoked marijuana twice. Time of dropping out of college in the fall of 1968 through Thanksgiving Day 1970, my asleep at the wheel period. It was 1 o'clock, and I was walking back to the barracks, and I looked over and I saw all these orphans. They were mostly GI kids, and if a Vietnamese woman had a mixed race kid, they were of no value, so they'd give them to the orphanages. And I felt like I was just kind of screwing up all my benefits and good things that I had going, and just screwing up my life. And it was time to go ahead and focus on doing something good with my life and not just be drifting along. I took 2 correspondence courses after this point. I took a photography course, and that kind of gave me a direction for my life's work, something I could do when I got out of the Army. I bought some equipment and had it shipped home. 2 1/4 equipment I had never even touched or knew what to do, but it looked professional. And I extended my tour so I could get out right when I left Vietnam. I took a correspondence course, and for the final test, they flew me from my nice safe base to a fire base, which was under fire almost every night, to take the final test. That was my Army way. I can remember riding with the machine gunner on the outside of the helicopter to fly to my final test. I took a night course in photography, and I was hooked when I saw that first image come out of the developer and turn into a picture. I bought an Olympus Pin F half-frame 35mm camera. The instructor took me aside once and said, "The money's in pornography, not in photography." Well, I didn't follow his advice. I ordered this professional 2 1/4 Mamiya C330 and had it sent home with the lenses, anticipating that I would become a professional photographer. My friend from David City stopped to see me about this time. He had been actually fighting all around Tay Ninh on this, and the picture here shows a black Virgin Mountain, and then he fought on the rice paddies around there too. Don't look, Grandpa. This was before the grandma was around, though. U.S. money was worth a lot more. The MP, military payment certificates, the workers would rather have them than their native country because it was so inflated. You could get lots of services for $5 a month. My Vietnam experience, I saw saints, people who really did really good things, and I saw sinners, people who would be mean to the Vietnamese, and I was somewhere in the middle. By the end of the tour, I made the decision of becoming a better person. I saw some things that I wished I didn't see. I guess that was part of war. Growing up in central Nebraska, I was pretty naive. Over in Vietnam, I saw racism. Whites about blacks, blacks about white. Vietnamese gooks were seen as less than human people. One day, I saw beside me a motorcycle with a woman on the back of this motorcycle nursing a pig. We all kept a short timer's calendar. Mine had 455 days, and then you'd always just mark off a day to get to one. For 14 and a half months, I saw these planes in the air flying home. They were freedom birds. After serving 14 and a half months, those damn planes were teasing me the whole time. It was now my turn to head home. I arrived in Oakland, and the Army shoved a wad of cash in my hands. I can remember I kept it in my sock because I was afraid somebody would bump me over the head, because this was the money for my new life. My homecoming. David City, Nebraska was not at war. Oh, you were in Knob? There's a Black River beer party tonight. The biggest, most shocking thing for me was that my classmate Ed had changed from Schlitz beer to Budweiser. He had called Schlitz beer horse piss all through high school. My first project after arriving home was just relax and go fishing. And I'll have to admit, I caught a sweet one. The best catch of my life was my wife Pat. We've been married 42 years, and she's still a dang good catch. She's provided the most happiness of my life. I had a back-to-the-world plan for March of 1971. I was getting combat pay, so I saved money. And then when I got home, I used the GI Bill to fund a famous photographer's course so I could learn all aspects of photography. I then got a job as an apprentice for a professional photographer, Carl Langren, in Columbus. And while in Columbus, I attended Platt Junior College at night and got a business degree, 2-year junior college. Then my wife and I moved to Kearney, and I got a business degree at Kearney State College. Then we went right on and we started Denny's Photography, which was our livelihood for 42 years as partners. We retired in 2012 and are still growing. Carl Langren kind of got me started on personal growth, and that led me to Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, and W. Clement Stone, and many others were partners in my success. When I retired, I read the biographies of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington to kind of get a sense of history. About this time, I put my Vietnam memories into a scrapbook and left it closed for 42 years. Then I reopened it a couple years ago, and that's why this show is here. For 42 years, I was a professional photographer and a businessman. This is just part of my camera collection that I accumulated. We were married on November 3rd, 1973 in North Bend, Nebraska. We lived in Columbus for a little bit while I graduated from Central Community College, and on January 2nd, we moved to Kearney to attend Kearney State College, lived in the married student housing, and borrowed our friends' living quarters at a liquor store to do our photography. We were tickled pink to find this little 15 by 15 commercial spot when I graduated from college where we started our business. We eventually went on and cut holes through the wall for 3 apartments and the floor, so we had a huge business for a little bit of rent. In 1980, we were looking all over for a place for our studio, and we found this place here and bought it and added on. It was our dream studio, and we spent our first 25 years basically in this building here building our business. We joined the CNPP Professional Photographers and the Professional Photographers of Nebraska. We had some really good employees that helped us with our business, and we went on and had lots of fun as a career as a husband and wife co-managers. We had lots of fun, met lots of people, worked with lots of nice people, and lots of good association. But the time had come for us to end our photography career, so we sold our real estate and retired in May 2nd, 2012. We have 2 pretty dang neat kids. Matt, he's 40 years old and just became an RN nurse, and Nikki, our daughter, she's about 38 and she's studying to be an LPN. So good luck. And then we have 5 grandkids, and they're good when they behave. Just kidding. We won't mention what Tennessee did to Nebraska in 2016. Vietnam story ending. In 1971, I came home to a shitty homecoming, to an ungrateful country. So I decided to put my Vietnam era in my rearview mirror. I never joined the American Legion or VFW because I almost felt like after 19 and a half months I was never really in the Army. Make a point to stop at these local monuments. They were always between my home and my work, and if I was biking or walking, I'd stop and just pay respects. I went to the Traveling Vietnam Memorial to take some pictures, and I was shocked because a gal came up to me and she gave me a little gift, and she said, "Thank you for your service." Somebody actually said thank you. Now, I am pleased that thanking and helping current veterans is more mainstream today. My grandson and I visited the memorial in Washington, D.C. Well, there's a picture in the bottom center of this here of a guy that I went to college with at Wayne in 1967, and they called up his Air National Guard, and he ended up getting killed over there. So it's interesting how your life is kind of intertwined, and it's kind of weird that I had a full life and he was killed at about 20 years old. This version of the show was intended to give to veterans at VA homes and stuff, to give them a little bit of entertainment. Now, I realize that my war experience was kind of a candy-ass tour compared to some people who gave so much and it was so terrible. Some give it all, lots of them give it all. So But this is to maybe put a little sunshine in some of these retired veterans. My grandchildren like to correct my spelling and grammar, so I left a few things on this show for them. Yeah, sure. Also, this was my buddy, my sleeping partner for about 8 months. But he didn't eat too much. I'd like to end with Toby Keith, American Soldier, Tim McGraw, if you're reading this, and Jody Messina, Heaven Was Needing a Hero. Yeah. That's all, folks.